strangely enough, they all died on board Titanic. What I mean by they all died on board, as far as we know, not one of them attempted to escape, according to official stories. Guggenheim was the guy, I don't know if you remember this from your Titanic stories, was the guy who got dressed up in his best suit and tie, white tie and tails, and when he was asked if he wanted a life jacket, he said, "No thank you, I'm dressed in my best and I'm prepared to go down as a gentleman." So he had no interest in escaping, allegedly. John Jacob Astor, nobody really knows what became of him, other than the fact that his body was picked up 5 days later by a Canadian ship, and his face was battered beyond recognition. It was only identified by the contents of his pockets, plus the fact he had $10,000, which was an absolute fortune in those days, stuffed in his pockets for some reason. But as I say, his face was battered beyond recognition. Was it natural or was he murdered? Who knows? We don't know, do we? And Isidor Straus was the guy who, again in Titanic Myths and Legends, he was the guy who went with his wife, elderly gentleman and his wife, went down to their cabin to wait their fates. They didn't. He tried to get on the lifeboat. They let her on. They wouldn't allow him on. So she got off the lifeboat again against everybody's wishes and against his wishes as well. And they both went down to their cabins to die together, allegedly. The three most senior officers on Titanic were obviously Captain Smith. There's all sorts of stuff about Captain Smith that I could go into here, but we just don't have time to do it. I mean, it's a bit of a plug here, but everything and much more besides is in there. But Smith apparently just stood on the bridge and just waited till the waters folded over him. He never attempted to escape, according to legend. Wilde never left the ship, and First Officer Murdoch allegedly, I believe he actually did, commit suicide by putting a gun to his head. But they all died on board Titanic, strangely. Not one of them allegedly attempted to escape, which I find very strange. Okay. But what became of the Olympic, or Titanic, whichever viewpoint you have? Well, that remained in service for the next 25 years or so until it was sold for scrap in the late 1930s. But the key thing about that, if it really was the Olympic, given what we know about the amount of damage it had had in that first year in service, there is absolutely no way on God's green earth that it could have stood the rigours of Atlantic, 15, 20 Atlantic crossings every year, or more, even more, for 25 years. It's just not nonsense. That could not happen. I've spoken to seafaring people about that and they said, no. Okay. There you go. And the insurance claim I've already mentioned, they paid out the full $3.2 million, which secured the future of both White Star Line and Harland and Wolff. And what happened to the plans for the setting up of the huge scam that was the Federal Reserve? Well, strangely enough, the Federal Reserve Act, without opposition, was quietly passed by Congress on the 23rd of December 1913, which was 2 days before Christmas, obviously, and something like 80 to 90% of Congress had already gone home for the Christmas holidays. Nice work, you can get it. Okay. And this, as I said, this is the beginning of the American national debt, which now stands at $21 trillion. Okay, I do have a graphic that shows you what $1 trillion look like, but I've not included it, but I should have done. It's staggering. Okay. And as I said before, on a couple of occasions, it enabled bankers to fund World War I because that had been in the planning for several decades. And that, my friends, is it. Draw your own conclusions. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. And thanks for listening to me drone on for 2 hours as well. Anybody got any questions? I'll try my best to answer them.
What can we do about it now then?
Sorry, what?
What can we do about it now we know all this? What can we do about it?
Well, people have tried to do things. People have tried to bring it to people's attention, but nobody wants to know, of course, because they don't want it to become popular knowledge. It's the same as anything else. People are powerless. They can only do what they, in inverted commas, allow us to do, and that ain't very much, I'm afraid.
So the ship with the blankets, the
Yes.
one that stopped. Where was that supposedly going with all those blankets? What was the cover story for that?
Well, it was just going to New York, but there's no reason given for why it was going to New York. But that's that's what its destination was, and I believe that's where it ended up. In fact, yeah, I know it ended up there, in California. Yeah, went to New York.
And it didn't respond because it didn't see the red, white, and blue.
That's where the plan sort of fell apart, because they were expecting white rockets. I believe that. And again, some of this is fact. Don't get me wrong, but some of it is my conjecture. I've put 2 and 2 together. I may have made 4 in some cases, but I may have also made 5 in other cases. But to me, again, I've looked at it for a long time, and I can't come up with a definitive answer as to exactly what happened. All I can tell you is that certain things are not true about the official story, and then there are certain other things that you can know that are fact, but certain other things you can only sort of put 2 and 2 together and make 4 from, or in some cases possibly 5. I don't pretend to know all the answers, but again, I don't mean to plug my book, but that, believe it or not, in 2 hours, it just scratched the surface. Honestly, there is so much other evidence for this. All I've tried to do is pick out the most obvious bits, but in there is lots more, like lots more about Captain Smith, how he was actually seen on more than one occasion, a couple of years apart in America after the accident. He was supposed to have gone down with the ship. All sorts of stuff. Again, I won't go into that at this stage, but lots and lots of anomalies, lots and lots of unanswered questions. I just believe that this happens to fit the bill, having studied it full time for a long time.
Did you see the programme a few months ago about the Titanic, where they were saying it was raging out of control?
Oh, the fire?
Yeah,
I don't even mention fire.
Deformation in the panels. Do you think that possibly fits in with the
it's possible.
damage?
Yeah, there's all sorts of theories about that as well. I don't know if everybody's heard what the gentleman's just said, but one of the things I don't cover in this presentation, but again it's in the book, is that all the time Titanic was on its voyage, there was a fire raging in one of the coal bunkers. Apparently it was quite a common thing, and they didn't used to worry about it too much, but it was actually a serious thing that there was the coal, because what used to happen when the coal was sent down into the hold, obviously it would all tumble into the hold, the metal holds, and if there was any sparks, it used to ignite the coal dust that was suspended in the air, and obviously if that suspended coal dust caught fire, it sometimes used to catch the coal on fire as well. And so I wouldn't say it was a common thing, but it was a reasonably common thing that there were fire in ships' holds that stored coal in the coal bunkers, and that's exactly what was happening. I've not gone into that, but again it's in there. But there's lots of different theories, to answer your question eventually, about what the implications of that is. Some people say, well, it's totally insignificant, that that was a common thing. Other people say, like you say, it would have bent the metal, the heat would have bent the metal, and maybe that weakened it. That perhaps caused the disaster. All sorts of different conjectures. Nobody really knows, and we probably never will know, unfortunately.
Do you think that was the Titanic then that happened? Because they found it on the pictures, haven't they? This deformation in the actual hull, they found it.
Oh, I don't know.
This deforming of it.
No, I've not seen that, but
yeah.
All I would say is, even stuff that I've put up there, don't believe everything. I mean,
yeah.
Even, especially from mainstream telly, they'll tell you anything, basically.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't necessarily put my trust in that.
I think on that, Steve, if you don't mind saying, I saw that as very interesting, and they suggested that it had been damaged before that actually happened, before the voyage, which could tie in with the Olympic.
Good one.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
They were suggesting that on that documentary.
Yeah.
It were already damaged, and that's what it actually weakened the structure when the fire took off. That's what happened.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah.
Like I say, there's no definitive answer. I hope you're not all disappointed thinking you were going to come and see something that absolutely nailed it all 100%.
So it still sank?
It still sank, yeah. 1,500 people still died. But even the number of passengers doesn't tell you as well. That's something else that's just reminded me. Again, I don't cover it in there. But strangely enough, when the Carpathia reported back to New York how many people it had taken on board, it actually said 830. Now, it actually rescued 705. Now, again, that raises all sorts of other questions. Were some of the survivors off the possible phantom other ship? You know, the upturned lifeboat that definitely didn't come from Titanic. I don't know. Again, you know, you can speculate all day long.
Do you think, John, that it was actually in collision with another ship?
Yeah, I do personally.
believe that?
I do personally,
Yeah.
yeah, because they couldn't have just taken the chance on it hitting an iceberg.
No.
And, you know,
Like an icebreaker or...
yeah, I think so. Again, that would make most sense, wouldn't it? That the yellow funnel steamer. Again, you know, I didn't really go into it in detail, but that was brought up a lot by passengers. A lot of passengers who weren't allowed access to the inquiries said that they saw this yellow funnel steamer and it was like literally 100 yards away.
It seems weird that the Olympia had that collision that had done so much damage, as if like it was testing what it.
I know you
what
sort of
happened.
you sort of alluded to that, didn't you, in the interval? And yeah, it's an interesting point. It could be that wasn't even an accident, like you say. They were just setting it up. They're just setting the whole thing up. But then again, if it had not had that accident, just thinking out loud, would they have needed to switch the identity of the ships? I don't know. It depends how much damage you believe was done in the other incidents. But I don't pretend to know all the answers,
No.
unfortunately.
So what do you think became of this ship that was in collision with the Titanic then?
Well, if it was an icebreaker, probably nothing. I mean, it just...
Would have
If
gone
it-
up?
Yeah, I mean, as well as that book, I've not brought any, but I've actually written a novel based on that book. And in that novel, I speculate that it was a Royal Navy icebreaker. Okay, and I build a little story about around that in the novel. So I don't know if I don't know the answer.
Do you think sorry, I can't remember the names of the three rich guys that they invited
Yeah.
on that they want to get rid of? Do you think they'll have put plans in place there to make sure that these three would not have been one of the survivors?
Absolutely, I do. Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. Yeah. Like I say, Astor's face was found
Yeah.
battered in. You could argue that it might have been hit by some falling
Yeah.
debris or something like that, but
So the other supposed quotes have been, made up, if you like, from the survivors.
yes.
Yeah.
And why would you go back to your cabin rather than kind of, humans
Human
don't do
nature,
that, do they?
you've got to survive, haven't you?
Yeah.
Ultimately, you've got
Yeah.
to survive.
It's just melodramatic poppycock, basically, the popular version of events.
I've got a couple of questions. I was wondering if you've looked into sort of news reports at the time and how the press covered it. I'm assuming that they said right from the start that it was an iceberg.
Yes, they did, yeah.
And I'm just wondering if you've read any kind of witness statements when they got to New York. I'm assuming there must have been loads of press there wanting to get first hand.
Yeah.
I just wondered if there was anything kind of
There's a lot in the press. There's a lot of witness statements that mention this steamer, this yellow funnel steamer. Some people said that, like I say, it was so close that you could actually see people on the deck. It was that close, and it was a starry night, but a moonless night. So yeah, there are lots of quotes in there. And again, I've put a lot of press stuff in there, actual photographs of the newspaper cuttings in there, and some of them are really interesting. Some of the different things that they say. One of the ones was that Captain Lord was asked by a newspaper reporter for his story, and he said something like, "It's classified information." What? Right, and I can't remember the exact words that he used, but it was along those lines. It's classified information. And again, there's a picture of that headline in the book.
The other question I was going to ask as well, with it being over 100 years ago, do you think that there would be any kind of release of information? Do you think that anyone could kind of pressure for that freedom of information?
I doubt it, because I don't think the real story has ever been recorded anywhere.
Yeah.
So why would, how could it be released? From where would it be released? There is no other story other than the official story, so.
Because I imagine in them days as well, without internet and smartphones and whatever, you believed what you read.
Exactly. there was only newspapers. There was no radio, no
Yeah.
TV, no internet, no computers, no telephones. It was
Unless
so
you were
easy
actually
to
there.
yeah, exactly. It was so easy to cover things up.
Yeah.
It's strange that only like six or seven people actually saw the iceberg.
Yeah,
Because
yeah.
even if something hit, the first thing you'd be like going, well, you know,
Yeah,
like
yeah, yeah.
out either a window
Yeah.
or something
As I
else
said-
running on deck, you'd still be able to see it, wouldn't you?
And
Yeah.
you'd be Instagramming it now.
Yeah.
Well, I know, but you'd literally
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
straight away, you're not going to like, you know, things not going that fast
Yeah.
to actually like get away from an iceberg.
Well, what had happened?
You know,
the-
you'd see it the
yeah.
back of you or the side
Exactly.
of you, wouldn't you?
There was an iceberg there, right? Okay, I know there was an iceberg there because there's too many people that say that they went past an iceberg, but a lot of people say that, phew, that was a narrow escape.
Yeah.
So whether they deliberately steered it near the iceberg to give everybody the impression, and that's what I was saying about the ice falling off the rigging and the aerial and all that stuff. That ice build-up on the deck, there were lots of big chunks of ice lying around. It could easily have been from, you know, because they thrust the engine into reverse straight away when it happened. And yet, again, that's a really strange thing because you think from almost full speed, thrusting the engines into reverse, it'd be a hell of a shock.
Oh, yeah.
But strangely, lots and lots of people said they never felt a thing. Nobody, you know, hardly anybody said that they felt